The Masked Maidens. To mask is to reveal. Level 204. The Grand Jungle. Email inbox. You have one new email from Samuel Millard 2001 at backmail.com.org to Seeing Falcon 11 at backmail.com.org. Subject Level 204 database entry. Attached files. Level and entry rev4.docs. Hey, cry responsibly. Long time no see. Sorry I haven't been around to visit all that much recently. Had a lot of shit to do in regards to level 204. Exploring the whole thing, writing up the stock, setting up base. Ugh, don't get me started on that. It's the most painful process you could possibly think of. Anyways, we can chat about my trip later on. I've messaged you on your work email, so you probably already know why I've messaged you here. Yes, I know how much you hate doing revisions, but Derek said I have to send them to you either way, so if you want to beef it out with someone, he's the guy you're looking for. Anyways, I'm going to leave you with this file now. I just need you to check it for errors and other inconsistencies, if there are any. I've had this checked by 3 other people already, so it should be mostly error free. Thanks in advance, dude. Hopefully, we can see each other in person soon enough. Sam. Survival difficulty. Class 2. Unsafe, secure, low entity count. Level 204 is a rainforest level that is notable for its esoteric terrain and its beautiful sceneries. The level is home to the person of interest known as Grande Orion. Long ago. Image caption: a photo of level 204 taken from the top of Meg Base Aleph. Description: Level 204 is a rainforest which is similar in nature to the Amazon rainforest in Brazil. The level is entirely filled with various tropical plants such as Rafflesia, kapok trees, zates, ipes, and several other such tropical trees typical of the Amazon. Each one of these plants, unlike their front room's counterpart, does not subsist on water. This has been proven to be the case due to the fact that despite being similar to a rainforest, the level lacks any form of rain and has a humidity level that is similar to that of deserts. Several aeons back in time. Because of these aforementioned properties, temperatures in level 204 are notoriously hot, consistently averaging at around 35 degrees Celsius, 95 degrees Fahrenheit. These observations have brought up discussion as to whether level 204 should even be classified as a rainforest or not. But, due to other similarities between the Amazon rainforest and the level, it has retained said classification for the time being. Before the advent of humanity. Apart from the previously mentioned trees, several fruit bearing plants can also be found sprouting throughout the level, growing fruits such as acacias, cacao pods, and papayas. A large amount of animals can also be found inhabiting this area. Monkeys, toucans, macaws, and snakes are all examples of Front Room's entities which roam the level freely. They are accompanied by creatures native to the Backrooms, such as clumps, bone thieves, and reality bugs, to name a few of the most common ones. When the first of the great species. A vast network of rivers passes through various valleys and crevices of the level. The rivers are filled with several different flora and fauna typical of the Amazon rainforest, including giant water lilies, piranhas, arapaimas, and, rarely, bull sharks. The source of the river water comes from the mountains which make up the terrain of the level, and the water of the level pools up at what is known as the Great Lake, see below, had not yet permeated the walls of this ancient dimension. Swimming in the rivers is not encouraged whatsoever. The animals encountered inside the river are highly dangerous, and the currents of the river are strong enough to sweep those foolish enough to dive into the river away, oftentimes resulting in drowning. Even traversing the rivers on a raft or a boat is dangerous, as said currents will flip the boat over and plunge anyone aboard it into the water. As such, should wanderers need to cross a river or traverse it in any way, they are advised to stick to the banks, or to use the bridges that the Meg has set up. The jungle was still. The terrain on the level, as mentioned earlier, is extremely rough and hilly. Several strange rock formations can be found around the level. Pieces of the ground jag up to form large spikes, and the surfaces oftentimes vary drastically in height, forming mountains, cliffs, and valleys. The mountains and cliffs reach high up into the air, whilst the valleys plummet to depths unseen in the front rooms. All of these give the level the reputation of being difficult to traverse among wanderers. Despite this, level 204's terrain is not entirely relentless. Flat clearings can often be found in the rainforest, and the rivers themselves, whilst extremely dangerous to traverse, provide clearings where one could set up their camp on a relatively flat ground as well. Long ago. Level 204 also contains within it various caves and caverns. These structures, whilst sparse in comparison to the previously mentioned formations, occupy the largest amount of space inside the level. The caverns themselves contain within them several underwater lakes, mineral and crystal deposits, and a diverse ecosystem of their own. Several millennia back in time. One other thing to note about the caves is the odd structures that can be found deep within them. Sets of ancient temples and monuments can be found scattered underground, all of them seemingly devoid of any life inside. It is unknown how exactly these temples came to formation, but several theories have been brought up of a species that may once have populated level 204 and built these temples. More information about the temples can be found later on in this article. The jungle hosted the first of the great species. The Great Lake. The Great Lake, as mentioned earlier, is the area in which all of the water of the level pools into. It measures an approximate 400 kilometers, around 250 miles, across, and has a depth of 350 meters at its lowest recorded point. The area around the lake is the one place in the entire level where the temperature drops drastically when compared to the average temperature of the rest of the level, being a constant chilly 10 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, at all times. The lake itself is extremely cold, measuring at an even chillier 1 degree Celsius, 33.8 degrees Fahrenheit. The reason as to why this happens is currently unknown, considering how hot the rest of the level is, but the phenomenon is attributed to an anomaly in the level itself. Nevertheless, swimming inside the Great Lake is highly discouraged, and any wanderers who wish to enact an expedition into the lake are advised to proceed with caution, as the temperature of the waters is detrimental to their health and safety. Their start was rough. Image caption: a section of the iceberg which juts out, taken during an attempted expedition to document the iceberg better. Despite the harsh environment, some creatures still manage to survive in the Great Lake. Whilst not much is known about them due to the previously mentioned conditions, observations have shown that the majority of them are crustaceans or cephalopods, which take after their front room's counterparts. Examples of creatures which are similar to those observed in the lake are yeti crabs, colossal squids, krill, and, uniquely, a bird that looks similar to penguins. Footnote: some of these creatures normally do not live in the conditions present in the lake. Colossal squids are found at a depth of 1 kilometer in the front rooms, but this strange and unnatural occurrence is attributed to the general nature of the backrooms. End footnote. The trials that they faced were harsh and brutal. At the center of the Great Lake lies a massive iceberg, which has a radius of 100 kilometers. For some reason, the center of the Great Lake's temperatures go lower than 0 degrees Celsius, and because of this, an iceberg formed at the exact center of it all. Said iceberg was theorized to be the source of the Great Lake's cold temperatures. but that theory was disproven after further research showed that the currents of the lake drifted towards the center and not the edges. The iceberg itself houses some of the previously mentioned creatures which live around its edges, but the closer wanderers get to the center, the colder it becomes, reaching a lowest recorded temperature of negative 57 degrees Celsius. Footnote: this is theorized not to be the coldest temperature which the iceberg reaches, since expeditions that go even further than the point where this temperature was recorded have been lesser in quantity, mainly due to the fact that the temperatures become so extreme after a certain point that expeditions become inefficient and extremely difficult to carry out. End footnote. This means that few, if any at all, animals live closer to the center than they do to the edge, but a small amount of animals still survive in this harsh environment. But in the end, most distinctively, the Great Lake can also be used as a navigation point for wanderers who are visiting the level. A total of 236 rivers end up leading towards the Great Lake, and the majority of them have been mapped extensively for easier navigation throughout the level. Whilst the level is lengthy from one channel to the other, mainly due to the lake's immense length, wanderers can use different channels of the lake to move from one place to the other safely and reliably. They thrived. Hazard Mountain. Image caption: one of the few pictures of the Alpine desert zone. The highest point in level 204 is the mountain, which has been dubbed Hazard Mountain due to the various threats that it poses. Standing 5,200 meters, 3.2 miles, tall, and a whole 300 kilometers, 186.4 miles, wide, the mountain is composed mostly of extremely rough and uneven terrain, similar in nature to the rest of level 204, and boasts a wide variety of different biomes and vegetation. Assumed to formerly be an active volcano, the mountain's appearance and structure heavily resemble that of Mount Kilimanjaro. They spread their roots into the land. Throughout the first three zones of the mountain, several booby traps can be found across the traversable parts of the mountain, all of which are highly dangerous to travelers that may come across them. Examples of such traps include coated punji spikes, swinging log traps, boulders, and, in some cases, traps which seem to be related to arcane practices whose mechanisms are, as of yet, unknown. How these traps are triggered is not understood currently, so wanderers are advised to always be alert when traversing these first few parts of the mountain. They perfected their craft. The mountain's environments are categorized into five different sections, all listed below: zone name, cultivation zone, zone description. Beginning at the bottom, the cultivation zone is the largest part of Hazard Mountain. The area is the safest part of the mountain and is the place where the majority of the previously described creatures congregate in, due to the abundance of food and fresh water. Said resources stem from two things, respectively: the large amount of fruit bearing plants which grow all around the area, which is considered the cultivation zone, and the river which flows around the whole mountain, which surrounds the base of the mountain where this zone is in, and provides the inhabitants of this zone with fresh water which they need to live. The plant life in the cultivation zone is much less dense than the rest of level 204, with occasional clearings and coherent paths where one can travel through without much difficulty, which contrasts with the rest of the level's structure. Zone height relative to mountain base: 0 meters to 1,100 meters, 0 feet to 3,609 feet. Footnote: this part of the mountain has a very gentle incline and makes up the majority of the mountain's surface area. End footnote. Zone name: Rainforest Zone. Zone description: this part of the mountain is the most similar to the rest of level 204. The terrain is uneven, as it is in the rest of level 204, as is the density of the trees and plants. Altitude sickness sometimes begins to take place at this height as well, so it is imperative for wanderers to prepare themselves for the occasion on which this should happen. It is particularly interesting to note that compared to the rest of the rainforests in level 204, this part of the mountain has fewer living beings inside of it. Zone height, relative to mountain base, 1,100 meters to 2,400 meters, 3,609 feet to 7,874 feet. Zone name, Heather and Moorland Zone. Zone description. The lower part of this zone contains a high amount of heather plants, which cover the moor of this zone. The upper part lacks the heathers entirely, and is entirely a moorland, with several ruinous structures. Footnote: the structures are similar in nature to the temples, which are talked about later in this article. End footnote. And paths that lead to nowhere built upon it. The ground in this zone is extremely dry and infertile, and is slightly less haphazard than the rest of the level. This part of the mountain entirely lacks large amounts of animal life, with the only organisms that can be seen in the area being a handful of different species of insects. Altitude sickness will most definitely have begun to take place here, so it is advised to those traveling up to this point to come prepared for said occurrence. Zone height, relative to mountain base, 2,400 meters to 3,500 meters, 7,874 feet to 11,483 feet. Zone name, Alpine Desert Zone. Zone description. The penultimate zone before the Arctic zone, the Alpine Desert Zone, is a barren wasteland of volcanic glaciers. The temperatures here drop below freezing very frequently, so any wanderers who make it past this point need to have a sufficient method of conserving heat efficiently. Few plants grow in this area due to the sub zero temperatures, steep incline, and harsh terrain. As such, very few non plant organisms have been known to survive here, so life in this area is scarcer than the previously described parts of the mountain. Other than said information, not much is known about this part of the mountain, mainly due to how hard it is to get to this point in the first place, and the danger posed by Grande Orion, the sole inhabitant of this area. Zone height, relative to mountain base, 3,500 meters to 4,700 meters, 11,483 feet to 15,420 feet. Zone name, Arctic Zone. Zone description. Very little is known about the Arctic Zone as is known about the other zones. No wanderer has made it to the Arctic Zone and come back alive, so all information gathered about it has been concluded from outside observation and theorization. As the zone is located several meters in the air and entirely covered in snow, it is assumed that no plant life can grow at this part. The temperatures are extremely cold, and the altitude is extremely thin. The climb towards the top can clearly be seen to be extremely steep, but the top of the mountain is circular and entirely flat. It is unknown what lies at the peak of Hazard Mountain. Zone height, relative to mountain base, 4,700 meters to 5,200 meters, 15,420 feet to 17,060 feet. Wanderers are not encouraged to climb Mount Hazard due to the risks present during the climb. Should one still decide to do so in spite of the risks present, they are encouraged to only climb up to the second zone due to the nature of the upper parts. And eventually, caves and temples. As previously mentioned, a vast network of cave systems can be found underneath the rainforest in level 204. Entrances to these systems can be found in the form of narrow shafts and holes throughout said area, which all expand into gigantic chambers that lead to other narrow shafts. The caves themselves are ancient, as evidenced by the presence of several stalactites, stalagmites, and columns, all of which are signs that the development of the cave has been ongoing for millennia. The cave corridors are all small and narrow, but the chambers are much larger, oftentimes housing huge lakes of their own. They harnessed the power of the masks. The caves house an ecosystem of their own, which consists mainly of crayfish, millipedes, and various other arthropods, as well as bats and some snakes. None of the animals inside the caves are particularly dangerous, and no entities are present in these caves, so any wanderers seeking refuge in level 204 are encouraged to enter one of the caves should they not be able to find a human settlement nearby. They tapped into the potential which they had. The only foreseeable dangers one could face whilst entering the caves are the uneven terrains, as previously described in the article, and the structures known as temples. And they perfected the unison between being and mask. The temples are large. Footnote: their radius averages at around 10 meters, and their heights have been known to average at around 2,000 meters. End footnote. Cylindrical structures, which are primarily made of marble and gold. Each temple is comprised of several rooms, corridors, and one worshipping room at the top of the temple, which is identifiable due to the fact that it is the only room with a domed ceiling. Throughout the temples, various depictions of level 204 and other phenomena related to the backrooms can be found etched onto the walls, all illuminated by a set of brass lanterns which hang from the ceiling, which glow with a bright green flame that cannot be turned off. They grew their culture into something truly beautiful. The corridors of the temples are all booby trapped in similar fashions to the traps on Hazard Mountain, albeit with an increase in the magical traps and a decrease in the quote unquote traditional ones, i.e., punji sticks, log swings, etc. The corridors are extremely unsafe for this reason, because, just like their mountain counterparts, the traps are also triggered by unknown means, and they are much deadlier due to the fact that they are in a confined space here. Their development was awe inspiring. Should one make it through the corridors alive, they will enter one of the various rooms of the temples. The majority of the time, the rooms are empty, having in them only a few tables and chairs strewn about them, if any at all, due to their varying sizes, which have been known to range from closet to auditorium sized. Some of the rooms have been found to have in them ancient artifacts from those that used to utilize the temples. These artifacts are oftentimes made of precious gemstones and metals, taking the form of what are assumed to be ancient deities from said inhabitants' time. However, extraction of these artifacts has thus far been unsuccessful, as all attempts to remove them from their places have resulted in the articles crumbling to dust. It is yet unknown why this happens, but it is assumed to have something to do with the safeguarding of these relics. It is assumed that at some point the rooms contained much more than just these objects, but whatever those other things were, they have since been lost to time. Their presence was a blessing. The most important part of the temples are their worshipping rooms, lying at the top of each temple where they can be entered via a small trap door at the sides. The worshipping rooms are enormous domed rooms which, as the name implies, were at some point used for rituals and worshipping sessions, which those that used the temples did. The curved walls lack the etchings of the previously described corridors, and instead they are entirely smoothed out and covered with several wall masks. Because of this, entering the worshipping rooms is extremely discouraged, and wanderers are advised to enter these rooms with caution should they decide to disregard this advice. Their future seemed promising. Other than the masks, these rooms are mostly empty, save for a flat slab of hollowed out marble in the center, which was most likely used for rituals of the worshippers. The exact nature of these rituals is unknown, but it is speculated to have something to do with wall masks due to their abundance in this room. They were at peace. Mercawberries and the Mercawberry ailment. Long ago. Perhaps the most interesting things one can notice about level 204 are the fruits that form upon certain trees in it. Normally, the trees mentioned earlier only grow a specific fruit, which grows only on said tree and nowhere else. However, a strange phenomenon affects some of the trees in level 204. The affected trees begin to grow strange fruits that they normally don't grow, which have been dubbed by wanderers as mercaberries. Only a century back in time. Mercaberries take the same color as the fruit that normally grows on the tree which they are on, but their shape is that of an apple sized cube. The fruits are one of the main sources of nutrition for permanent residents of level 204, but the amount of them that the residents consume is minimal due to their primary side effect, which has been designated as the mercaberry ailment. This sickness occurs only if one has eaten an average of 4 mercaberries per day consecutively over the course of 3 days. The later stages of the mercaberry ailment are incurable, so it is crucial that wanderers keep that in mind when consuming mercaberries. The perfect species. The symptoms and progression of mercaberry ailment can be found below. Stage 1. The subject will begin to feel their spit tasting sweeter and sweeter as time goes on. Certain body parts, such as the lips, fingernails, and nose, begin to change their colors into those of the last mercaberries the subject had eaten. The subject will report feeling hungrier during this stage and will require larger amounts of food to satiate themselves going onwards, with mercaberries being the quickest way to satisfy said urges. This heaven sent gift. Stage 2. Salivation will begin to occur in higher frequencies during this stage, as will sweating and urination. The metabolism of the subject will begin to slow down at this point, so a sharp spike in weight gain will be expected. The tinge of the subject's skin and hair will also begin to take the color of the other affected parts, getting more apparent as the stage progresses. Saw its final minutes. It is to be noted that this is the last stage that wanderers can cure themselves of mercaberry ailment in. The method of doing so is to starve oneself of all food for 3 days and drinking plenty of water. Once this is done, the non visual effects of the sickness will begin to subside, but the visual effects will remain permanently, no matter what. This counts for both stages 1 and 2. Tick on the clock. It is currently unknown why this cures mercaberry ailment, but its discovery has led to several lives being saved, whereas before they would have simply been lost. The arrival of a new great species. Stage 3. Should one have failed to cure mercaberry ailment by the previous 2 stages, they will go into the penultimate stage of mercaberry ailment, one that rivaled their presence. During this stage, subjects will begin to feel feverish, and their appetites will have diminished greatly compared to the previous stages. By this point, the skin will have completely turned into another color and will begin secreting a slimy mixture over the entirety of the subject's body. Sharp pains begin to be felt across the whole body during this stage, and the flesh of the subject will begin to get softer as time goes on. One that posed a threat to them. Stage 4. The fourth and final stage of mercaberry ailment, stage 4, begins when the first vine begins to burst out of the skin of the subject. These vines will wave about, feeling for places onto which they can latch onto. The whole process has been described by subjects as extremely painful and distressing. One that without knowing it, when the vines latch onto a stable surface, the subject will have their vital organs punctured by an ingrown set of these vines, which kills the subject almost instantly. Once this is done, the body will spend the next hour transforming all of its cells into one that is similar to a mercaberry, ending the transformation when they have entirely been turned into a large mass of mercaberry flesh. The prognosis of mercaberry ailment can be considered concluded at this point. Cast an entire species. Strangely enough, mercaberry ailment does not seem to affect creatures other than humans. Several tests have returned inconclusive when experimenting with other species, so it is assumed to be an anomaly that affects only humans. Into oblivion. Grand Orion. Grand Orion, known by some as the Hunter, is arguably the biggest threat to wanderers in level 204. Not many details are known about Grand Orion due to their hostility towards wanderers they come across, so all information present here may be inherently false or incorrect. Their numbers dwindled. Grand Orion has been described as an extremely large. Footnote, they have been described as being a full 10 feet in height, and footnote, muscular man with light brown skin, which has occasional patches of white scattered across it. Reports of their clothing have varied. Footnote, most reports state that their clothing was made of a brown, leathery substance, while others have stated that it looks like goat skin. End footnote. But all those who have encountered Grand Orion and lived to tell the tale have stated one thing in common, that they wear a large silver pendant on their chest and an instance of Object 24 wall masks on their face. The make of the mask is unclear, as of now, and no report has given a consistent description of the mask's design and form. Their society fell to ruins. As mentioned earlier, Grand Orion resides in the Alpine desert zone on Hazard Mountain. No sightings of Grand Orion have been reported on the first two levels of the mountain or elsewhere in the level, so anywhere from the third zone upwards is considered their zone of operating. It is unknown why or when Grand Orion decides to attack a wanderer, but staying in these zones for a long time is guaranteed to attract their attention. When a wanderer becomes targeted by Grand Orion, they will locate the wanderer via unknown methods, even if they are extremely far away from each other. And before they knew it, when Grand Orion finds their target, they will begin hunting them down. They have been known to use various methods of doing so, such as shooting wanderers with arrows, casting spells, stabbing them, and even beating them with their bare hands. The attack will not stop until either Grand Orion loses interest in the subject, or the wanderer is dead. The locations of the corpses of the victims, which Grand Orion has killed, have yet to be found. They had all been erased. The only method of escaping their wrath is to leave the third zone of the mountain. Attempts made to overpower them have all been futile, with each one resulting in complete failure. So wanderers are discouraged from trying to fight Grand Orion. Wanderers are also discouraged from trying to hide from them, as they have a keen sense of direction, as described earlier, so it is impossible to do so without being caught. All of them, except for one. Whilst information about Grand Orion is scarce, a set of letters recovered from one of the temples gives way to theories as to their purposes and missions for the society that inhabited the temples and Grand Orion themselves. Footnote. Thus far, these are the only letters that have been recovered pertaining to the ancient society that once inhabited level 204. Translations of the documents were made via third-party help from external sources. End footnote. A translated edition of them can be found attached below. To my dear friend Victos, the time has come where I am to take the young ones for a pilgrimage to the holy grounds once more. Grand Orion has discussed with me and we are to meet them at the foot of the mountain, where we shall begin the journey to the arid lands in preparation for what is to come in the following days. The younglings are ecstatic for the journey. They cannot wait until the time comes where we go to see the great sculpture and the pendulum. The only one I know of who is not excited for the trip is your own youth. Crocada constantly keeps asking me of your whereabouts. She grows impatient for your return. Please do not keep her waiting too long. I understand that your work consumes several cycles of time, but you must not neglect your daughter like this. Her bearing of the mask is soon as well. It would be utterly shameful if you are absent for such an important occasion. Do not disappoint her. I expect to hear from you soon. Firigar. Firigar, rest assured that I am not to be much longer on my trip. The sigils on the frozen plains have been etched accordingly, and our next trip should not be imminent for the next 100 years at best. Our journey was a success. As for the pilgrimage, I am unsure if I can make it in time for that. The travel back to our abode is estimated to take a minimum of 4 cycles in itself, and seeing as the pilgrimage is set to happen in the next 2 days as of writing this letter, I doubt that we will have arrived by then. Send Crocata my best wishes. Tell her that father will be back soon, and that I will be with her for the mask bearing, no matter what the cost is. Do also send Grand Orion my humblest regards when you are visiting the holy grounds. Their guidance is of utmost value to your journey, and their hospitality is one which we have not hitherto seen from the previous keepers of the mountain. Until we meet again, Victos. The fates of the authors of these messages are currently unknown, as are the locations described in the letters, but judging from how they wrote of Grand Orion, the authors seemed to be on good terms with them. It is unknown if the authors of these messages were human or not, just as it is unknown if Grand Orion themselves are human. One sole survivor. It can be inferred from these letters that Grand Orion used to be a keeper of a quote unquote holy ground at some point in their lifetime, which seemed to serve great significance to this society, hence why they organized pilgrimages to them. The work spoken of in the second letter that was done on the quote unquote frozen plains, which is most likely the iceberg, has yet to be found, as no etchings or markings have been found anywhere on the icebergs yet. One last relic. Bases, communities, and outposts. Meg Base Aleph, a large granite building which was recently constructed near the Great Lake, houses the Level 204 research team and offers protection to all wanderers seeking refuge. Since it was only recently constructed, very few of its many rooms have been filled. Of a forgotten time. Current human population 17. They still subsist. Mountain Outpost, a set of 6 buildings built on the first 2 zones of Hazard Mountain. Each one is constantly manned by a pair of 2 Meg personnel, which cycle periodically, built to keep watch over the operations of Grand Orion and to aid in the disabling of active traps. Waiting for a day. Current human population 12 overall, 2 in each building where they can rest easily. Entrances and exits. Occasionally, isolated Zates trees can appear in the forest of level 170, concrete boxes. Climbing up said trees will sometimes transport you to the top of an identical tree in level 204. The landscape of level 40, Roller Rock and Pizza, will occasionally begin to terraform into that of level 204, which eventually leads into said level, knowing that their people have been avenged. Exits. No clipping on the iceberg sometimes sends you to level 129, the White Forest. Deposits of liquid gallium will appear in place of water in hotter areas of the caves. Entering them will bring you to level 75, Gallium Caves. As one entered level 204 from level 40, Roller Rock and Pizza, they can also leave level 240 in the same way. The terrain will begin shifting to that of level 40 until one finds that they are now inside the level. Send an email from seeingfalcon11 at backmail.com.org to Samuel Millard 2001 at backmail.com.org. Subject: Reply to level 204 database entry. Hi, Sam. I've checked over your entry, and there seems to be no issues with it. I'll be uploading this to the database in due time. You've done a good amount of work for the database now, so I'll be sure to notify the overseers in hopes of making you a senior archivist. Expect a promotion soon enough. As for meeting up, I'm a bit swamped with works right now, so I doubt I'll be able to meet up anytime soon. When the time comes and I can meet up with you, I'll be notifying you ASAP, and that's a promise I intend on keeping. Great work once more. Send my kindest regards to the team. Do you want to copy the contents of this file? Yes or no? Yes. File copied. Do you want to create a new page for level 204? Yes or no? Yes. Page created successfully. Do you want to paste your clipboard into article level 204? Yes or no? Yes. Clipboard pasted successfully. Save changes? Yes or no? Yes. Error 209. File not saved. Save changes? Yes or no? Yes. Error 210. Data corrupted. Email inbox. You have one new email from corrupted to seeingfalcon11 at backmail.com.org. Subject untitled. Greetings. I assume you've learned your fair share about me from the most humbling description that your organization has designated to me in this document. As such, I do not think I need to dwell much on formalities with you. Most of it is true. I am a cold blooded killer. I do hunt down travelers which attempt to make their way towards what you have so disrespectfully nicknamed Hazard Mountain, and I do keep myself secluded from the rest of you and your kind at all costs, all for my own reasons. I do not deny any of this. After all, I am a so called monster, not a liar, a cheat, or a fraud. The same cannot be said about you, cry responsibly. Yes, I see you there. I know exactly who you are, and just about all of what you have done. Goggling at the terminal you sit comfortably at, wondering why this could possibly be occurring to you. The masked ones have informed me of it all, you know. They've told me of your misdeeds towards their own kind, your policies against the rightful owners of this world, the aid you have given to the destroyers of the once glorious kingdom, upon which you have disgracefully built on an empire of blood and bones. I don't normally engage with your kin, nor do I with them. Though we share the affliction of the masks, it does not make us any closer to each other than I am with you. But there is something else that forms a weak link between me and them. I hold no doubt that you have been notified of the masked maidens. All of those at your position are, and for good reason. They are a threat to your security. Your society, built on lies, has been outed as the corrupt establishment which it truly is, and they are the ones who will topple it over when the time comes to do so. The clock ticks towards your eventual demise, and you are spearheading the losing army. Do you know the make of the mask I don? The object that forms me hand in hand with my physical body? The mask that you've used to experiment apathetically with countless times? I cover my face with an Oni mask. I persecute order and justice in a world which is lacking in those honest enough to use them as their foundation. I do not associate myself with your kind, but seeing how you treat your own like livestock, it makes the inner magistrate in me bang the gavel. That weak link, the thing that connects us, is our inclination towards justice and the truth. When I work with the maidens, I work not for them, but for a greater good that surpasses my conflict with your species. You may consider it revenge. Revenge for what you all did to my kind all those years ago. I hold no regrets for every life of your kinds which I have taken, as they are all replacements for those of my brethren's which you have so gracefully decided were not deserving of the gift of life. Whether it be the last thing I do, or the first of many, I will bring you all down. Your entire organization will crumble through the bars of wrath I hold for your people, and my name will send shivers down the spine of all those who hear it when I am done with humanity. Wait and see is all I shall disclose. Revel in the light one last time before your corruption ends up being your demise. Our next communication will be far sooner than you think. Until then, my final warning is to prepare yourself thoroughly for the storm that is to come whilst you are still at your zenith. With utmost displeasure, Grand Orion.